They thought grief had made me soft. A grieving widow easy to sweep aside. When their polished family lawyer slid the settlement across the glass table, he looked at me with pity. Completely unaware he was walking into a trap set years ago, I did not fight them. I simply picked up the pen and gave them exactly what they wanted, knowing it was the only way to trigger the one sentence that would cost them everything. The salt air in Briarhaven usually smelled clean, like cold water and pine, but on the day of Ethan's memorial, it just smelled like money. It was a heavy, suffocating scent, mixed with the expensive perfume of women who wore black wool coats that cost more than my first car and the exhaust of town cars idling in the church lot. I stood near the front of the sanctuary, my hands clasped so tightly together that my knuckles had turned the color of old parchment. I was 33 years old, and I was a widow. The word felt like a stone in my throat, jagged and impossible to swallow. It had been 10 days since the aneurysm that took him, 10 days of silence in our townhouse, 10 days of waking up and reaching for a warm shoulder that was no longer there. But today was not about my grief. I had learned that within 5 minutes of arriving at the massive stone chapel overlooking the Atlantic. This was a Rourke event. Ethan had been a Rourke, though he rarely used the name like a weapon. He used it like an apology. He had spent the 5 years of our marriage trying to be just Ethan, the architect with the gentle hands and the quiet laugh, the man who liked fixing old watches and walking on the beach when the tourists were gone. But here, in the heart of Briarhaven, he was the prodigal son of Rourke Maritime Holdings, and his death was apparently a corporate restructuring opportunity. I watched as the pews filled up. These people did not look like mourners. They looked like shareholders. Men in tailored suits shook hands with firm, businesslike grips, nodding solemnly before immediately leaning in to whisper about market fluctuations and board seats. I heard the low hum of conversation, and none of it was about the man who used to make terrible pancakes on Sunday mornings. A woman I vaguely recognized as a cousin breezed past me, barely meeting my eyes. So tragic. She murmured to the air near my left ear. I nodded, because I did not trust my voice. Alice? The voice was cool, polished, and carried the specific cadence of someone who expected the room to stop when she spoke. I turned to see Vanessa Rourke, Ethan's half-sister. She was 5 years older than Ethan, with hair the color of spun gold, and eyes that looked like they had been cut from blue glass. She wore a black dress that managed to be both appropriately somber and aggressively stylish. "Vanessa," I said, "thank you for handling the arrangements." Ethan would have hated them. Of course. He would have wanted a bonfire on the beach and a few beers with his actual friends, but the Rourkes did not do bonfires. They did cathedrals and imported lilies. She stepped into my personal space, close enough that I could smell her mint breath. She did not hug me. Rourkes did not hug unless there was a camera present. "We have to protect the family legacy," she said, her voice dropping to a confidential murmur. "It is what Father would have wanted, and Ethan, eventually." I looked at the casket, polished mahogany under the dim church lights. I doubt that. I thought. Vanessa placed a hand on my forearm. Her fingers were cold. "How are you holding up?" she asked. The question should have been kind. It sounded like an audit. "I am managing." I said, "Good. You are a sensible woman." "Alice, I have always said that." "Steady." She paused, and her eyes dropped to my stomach for a fraction of a second before snapping back to my face. "I have to ask," she said, and her tone shifted into something sharper. A few of the trustees were wondering, with everything happening so fast, and the estate being so complex, "Are you expecting?" I stared at her, the question taking a moment to filter through the fog of my grief. She was asking if I was pregnant, not because she wanted a niece or nephew to love, but because a child would change the math of the inheritance. "No," I said, my voice flat. "I am not." Vanessa exhaled, a tiny puff of relief she did not bother to hide. "That is for the best," she said. "For everyone. It simplifies things. You can focus on healing yourself without complications." She patted my arm, a dismissive gesture, like one might pat a dog that had behaved well. "We will need to sit down soon. Alice, maybe next week. There are passwords. Accounts. Ethan was so messy with his digital footprint. We need to secure the assets before the market gets jittery about the transition. I pulled my arm away, gently but firmly. He was your brother. Vanessa. She looked at me, and for a second, the mask slipped. I saw not grief, but annoyance. He was a Rourke, she said. That comes with responsibilities he liked to ignore. I am just picking up the slack, like always. She turned and walked away, vanishing into a cluster of men in gray suits who parted for her like the Red Sea. I stood alone by the front pew, realizing that Ethan's family did not see a widow standing here. They saw a loose end. Ethan had told me stories. Of course, he had told me that Rourke Maritime Holdings was a beast that ate everything in its path. He had told me that his father, a tyrant of a man who died 3 years ago, had pitted the children against each other like dogs in a pit. Ethan had taken his trust fund, bought a small share of the company to keep a toe in the water, and then retreated to live a normal life with me. He had a side venture. He had said once, a quiet thing. Something that was just his. He never gave me the details, and I never pushed. I respected his need for a separate peace. Now, standing in the cold, scented air of the church, I wished I had asked more questions. The attack did not come with shouting. It came with paper. A week after the funeral, I was back at work. I ran the operations for a community health nonprofit in the city, a job that involved a lot of spreadsheets, grant applications, and finding housing for families in crisis. It was unglamorous, exhausting work, and I loved it. It felt real. I was sitting at my desk, trying to focus on a budget report, when the receptionist buzzed me. Alice, there is a man here to see you. He says it is legal. My stomach dropped. I assumed it was about one of our clients' an eviction notice or a custody dispute. Send him back. I said. The man who walked into my cramped office looked like he had taken a wrong turn on his way to a yacht club. He was tall, silver-haired, and wearing a suit that probably cost more than our annual medical supply budget. He carried a leather briefcase that looked soft to the touch. Mrs. Kelly, he asked. His voice was a rich baritone, soothing and practiced. Yes, I am Miles Ketter. I represent the Rourke estate. I did not stand up. I felt a sudden, instinctive need to stay seated, to keep the desk between us. I thought Vanessa said she would call. I said, Mr. Ketter smiled. It was a sad, sympathetic smile that did not reach his eyes. Vanessa is very overwhelmed with the transition. She asked me to handle the administrative side of things, to spare you the stress. He placed the briefcase on the guest chair, popped the latches, and pulled out a thick envelope. I need to serve you with these formally, he said. It is just procedure. He handed me the envelope. It was heavy. What is this? I asked. A notification regarding the marital agreement, he said. And the terms of the spousal allowance, I frowned. Allowance. Ethan and I had signed a prenuptial agreement. I remembered it clearly. It was 5 years ago. Ethan had been embarrassed about it, but he said his father insisted. I had read it, and it seemed fair. It protected the core Rourke shares, but it left everything we built together to me, along with a significant portion of his personal liquid assets. It was standard. This does not sound like what we signed. I said, Mr. Ketter's expression did not change. The terms are quite clear. Mrs. Kelly, under the agreement dated August 14th, 5 years ago, in the event of Ethan's death without issue, the bulk of his assets revert to the family trust. You are entitled to a lump sum settlement of $50,000 and a housing allowance for 6 months. After that, the townhouse returns to the estate. The room seemed to tilt. 50,000, I said. The townhouse is our home. We bought it. The trust bought it. Mr. Ketter corrected gently. Technically, Ethan was the beneficiary, but the title is held by Rourke Holdings, and the agreement limits your claim. That is not the agreement I signed. I said, my voice rising. Mr. Ketter reached into his bag and pulled out a copy. He slid it across the desk. I think you will find your signature on the last page. I grabbed the document. My hands were shaking. I flipped to the back. There it was. My signature. A looped, blue ink scrawl, but as I flipped back through the pages, something felt wrong. The font looked slightly different than I remembered, and the dates. I scanned the first page. August 14th. We signed it on the 12th. I whispered. I remember because it was 2 days before my birthday. We went to dinner afterwards to celebrate and forget about the legal nonsense. Mr. Ketter did not blink. Perhaps your memory is clouded by grief. Alice, it happens. Trauma does strange things to the mind. I looked at the initials at the bottom of page 3. They were mine, but the slant was slightly off, just a fraction, and there was no page number on page 4. The document I signed had page numbers on every single sheet. I looked up at him. This is altered, I said. Mr. Ketter's face hardened. The sympathy vanished, replaced by a bland, corporate boredom. That is a very serious accusation. Mrs. Kelly? And one I would advise you not to repeat. This document was notarized and filed. If you intend to contest the validity of a filed legal instrument, you are looking at years of litigation, expensive litigation, against a firm that has never lost an estate case in this state. He stood up. Review the offer. The family wants to be generous. They are willing to expedite the check, but they want the townhouse vacated by the 1st of the month. They have a buyer lined up. He turned to leave. By the 1st, I said, that is in 2 weeks. Then I suggest you start packing, he said without looking back. 2 days later, I was summoned. The email came from Vanessa's assistant. Family meeting regarding estate resolution. 10:00 a.m., Rourke Plaza. I walked into the building feeling like a child called to the principal's office. The Rourke headquarters was a tower of glass and steel on the waterfront. The conference room they led me to was entirely glass walls, offering a panoramic view of the harbor that Ethan had loved and his family owned. Vanessa sat at the head of the table. Miles Ketter was to her right. A man I recognized as their younger brother, Julian, was scrolling on his phone at the far end. Sit, Alice, Vanessa said. There was no coffee offered, no water. I sat. We want to help you. Vanessa started. She had her hands folded on the table. We know you are grieving. We are all grieving. She did not look like she was grieving. She looked like she was negotiating a merger. But, she continued, we cannot have this drag on. Ethan's affairs were chaotic. We are cleaning them up. The offer Miles presented is generous. Generous, I said. You are kicking me out of my home. You are claiming I signed away my rights for less than the price of a used car. Miles leaned forward. It is the agreement you signed. Alice, we are just enforcing it. I pulled out my notebook. I had spent the last 48 hours tearing my apartment apart, looking for my copy of the prenup. I couldn't find it. It had been in the safe, but the safe was empty. Ethan must have moved it, or someone else had. I know that document is not right, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The dates are wrong. Vanessa sighed, a long, weary sound. Alice, do not do this. Do not be the greedy widow who drags the family through the mud because she thinks she won the lottery. I am not greedy. I said, I just want what is fair. What Ethan wanted for me. Ethan wanted the family legacy protected. Vanessa snapped. That is why he signed the agreement. She tapped a tablet on the table. We are prepared to increase the settlement, she said. 100,000. But you sign a full non-disclosure agreement. You vacate the property in 7 days, and you stop asking questions about the business. Why would I ask questions about the business, I asked. Vanessa glanced at Miles. We just want a clean break, Miles said. Then Vanessa swiped the tablet and slid it toward me. And we want to make sure you understand the reality of your situation, she said. I looked down at the screen. It was a photo of me. I was in the grocery store parking lot, loading bags into my car. It was taken yesterday. I swiped. Another photo. Me walking into my office. I swiped again. Me sitting on a park bench, crying. 2 days after the funeral. My blood ran cold. You are having me followed, I whispered. We are conducting due diligence, Vanessa said coldly. To ensure the estate's assets are not being misappropriated, she leaned in, her blue eyes hard as diamonds. Look at your life. Alice, you work at a nonprofit that depends on the goodwill of wealthy donors. Many of those donors are friends of this family. If you make a scene, if you drag this into court, people will talk. They will say you are unstable. They will say you are gold digging." She paused to let the words sink in. "We can make you toxic. Alice, your board of directors dislikes scandal. How long do you think you will keep that job if the Rourke family publicly questions your integrity?" I sat there, frozen. The threat was elegant, precise, and absolute. They weren't just taking the money, they were threatening to take my reputation, my livelihood, my ability to survive. "Take the deal," Miles said softly. "It is mercy." I looked at them, the three of them, sitting in their tower, surrounded by security guards I had seen in the hallway. They held all the cards. They had the money, the lawyers, the power. "I will think about it," I said. I stood up. My legs felt like jelly. "You have 24 hours. Vanessa called after me. I went home to the townhouse that wasn't mine anymore. I locked the door and slid the deadbolt, though I knew it wouldn't stop them. If they wanted to get in, they had keys. They owned the building. I sank onto the floor of the bedroom closet. It smelled like Ethan, cedar and Old Spice. I buried my face in his shirts, sobbing until my chest ached. I felt small. I felt stupid. How had I not seen this coming? Ethan had warned me they were sharks. But I had thought they were just difficult people. I didn't know they were monsters. I sat there for an hour, the darkness of the closet wrapping around me. My hand brushed against something hard in the corner, behind a stack of shoeboxes. It was Ethan's old messenger bag, the canvas one he used back in college, the one he swore he'd thrown away years ago. I pulled it out. It was dusty. I opened the flap. Inside, there was a single, thick envelope. On the front, in Ethan's messy, distinctive scrawl, were the words, "If they come fast, don't fight fast." My heart hammered against my ribs. I tore the envelope open. Inside was a silver USB drive and a handwritten letter on yellow legal pad paper. "Alice, if you are reading this, I am gone, and they have already made their move. I am sorry. I tried to fix the paperwork, to shield you, but Father's trust is a labyrinth, and Vanessa has eyes everywhere. They will come at you with a fake agreement. I know because I found a draft of it on the server 6 months ago. They will try to scare you. They will threaten your job. Do not fight them yet. They are waiting for you to scream and sue. If you sue now, they will crush you with motion after motion until you are bankrupt. You need leverage. You need to know where the bodies are buried. Trust Harper Linwood. No one else. Not the lawyers, not my friends. Harper. Her number is on the back. I love you. Do not let them win." I turned the page over. A phone number. No name. Just 10 digits. I stared at the paper. Ethan had known. He had lived with this fear, this anticipation of betrayal, and he had prepared for it. I wiped my eyes. The tears were gone, replaced by a cold, vibrating clarity. I pulled out my phone and dialed the number. It rang twice. "Hello?" A woman's voice. Sharp. Alert. "This is Alice Kelly." I said. There was a pause. "I have been waiting for your call," the woman said. "Where are you?" "I met Harper Linwood at a diner 3 towns over, a place with sticky tables and bad coffee, where no Rourke would ever be caught dead." She was younger than I expected, maybe late 20s, with sharp features and dark hair pulled back in a severe bun. She wore a leather jacket and looked like she didn't sleep much. She didn't shake my hand. She just slid into the booth opposite me and looked me up and down. "You look like hell," she said. "Thank you." I said, "I feel like it." Harper nodded. "Ethan was a good man." She said, "He was the only one in that company who actually gave a damn about the people on the docks. That is why they hated him." "Who are you?" I asked. "I was his operations director," she said. "Until Vanessa fired me 3 months ago for asking too many questions about the shipping manifests. Ethan kept me on privately. He paid me out of his own pocket to keep digging into what Harper leaned in. Rourke Maritime isn't just shipping cargo. Alice, they are moving things off the books. Ethan found irregularities. That is what his side venture was about. Grayfield Harbor Works. Grayfield. I remembered the name. Ethan had mentioned it once, casually. It is a small repair yard, Harper said, but it holds the lease on a critical piece of the waterfront, a piece the Rourkes need for their new expansion. Ethan bought it to block them, to force them to negotiate. She tapped the table. If they control his estate, they control Grayfield. And if they control Grayfield, they bury the evidence. They offered me a settlement. I said, if I sign an NDA and walk away. Harper's eyes narrowed. And if you fight them, they will destroy my reputation. They have photos. They threatened my job. Harper nodded grimly. That is the playbook. Scare you into silence. Make you feel powerless. She looked at me, her expression intense. Ethan left instructions. On the USB. But he warned me to tell you this. You cannot win a direct war. Not right now. They have the judges, the police, the money. If you try to blow this up tomorrow, you will lose. So what do I do? I asked. Harper took a sip of her coffee. You give them what they want. I stared at her. What you surrender, she said. You let them think they have won. You sign their papers. You take their money. You let them get comfortable. Why? Because when they are comfortable, they get sloppy, Harper said. And because Ethan built a trap. But the trap only works if they think the danger is gone. I looked out the window at the parking lot. I thought about Vanessa's cold smile. I thought about Miles Ketter's fake sympathy. I thought about the PI photos of me crying on a bench. They wanted a weak widow. They wanted someone who would fold under pressure. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't grief anymore. It was something harder, like iron cooling. I looked back at Harper. If I do this, I said, if I play along, can we really hurt them? Harper smiled. It was a terrifying smile. Alice, if we do this right, we won't just hurt them. We will take everything they have. I took a deep breath. I thought about the townhouse I had to leave. I thought about the lies. Okay, I said. I picked up the check. Tell me what I need to do. The next morning, I put on my best dress. I applied makeup to hide the circles under my eyes. I practiced my expression in the mirror until I looked sufficiently broken, sufficiently defeated. I drove to the glass tower. I walked past the security guards. I took the elevator to the top floor. Vanessa and Miles were waiting. I sat down. I did not look them in the eye. I kept my head down. My shoulders slumped. I cannot fight you, I said softly. I do not have the money, and I cannot lose my job. Vanessa exchanged a look with Miles, a look of triumph. You are making the right choice. Alice, she said. I pushed the settlement paperwork across the table. I will sign, I said, but I have one request. Vanessa raised an eyebrow. What is it? I want to resolve this quietly. I will give you everything. The house, the claim, my silence. Just, please don't hurt my reputation. Miles smiled. He slid a pen toward me. Sign here, Alice, and this will all be over. I picked up the pen. My hand did not shake. I signed my name. Alice Kelly. I watched the ink dry. I had just signed away my home and my husband's legacy, but as I looked up at them, watching them smile their shark smiles, I knew something they didn't. I hadn't signed a surrender. I had just signed their death warrant. The email I sent to Miles Ketter was a masterpiece of feigned incompetence. I spent 40 minutes drafting it, deleting words that sounded too sharp, too aware, replacing them with phrases that suggested a woman drowning in administrative confusion. Dear Mr. Ketter, I am trying to process the paperwork you gave me. It is all a bit overwhelming right now. Could you possibly send me an itemized breakdown of how the estate value was calculated? I just want to understand what is happening before I agree to the final numbers. Perhaps we could bring in a mediator just to help me navigate the terms. I want to be cooperative. I just need help understanding. I hit send. Then, I opened a fresh notebook. It was a simple black composition book, the kind I used to buy for school. On the first page, I wrote the date and the time. I logged the email I had just sent. I logged the phone call from yesterday where Vanessa's assistant had accidentally dead-named my maiden name on a draft document. I logged the time the private investigator's sedan had idled across the street from my townhouse 7:45 in the morning to 9:15. Ethan had told me, in that final letter, to build a lever. I did not have his money or his influence, but I had time, and I had attention to detail. I became a ghost in my own life, to the world. I was the grieving widow who was slowly folding under the pressure of reality. To myself, I was a recording device. Every voicemail Miles left me, his tone dripping with patronizing patience, was saved and backed up to 3 different cloud servers. Every interaction was time-stamped. I started recording my own phone calls, a legal practice in our state, as long as one party consented, and I was the consenting party. They thought they were managing me. In reality, they were feeding me evidence. 2 days after the meeting at Rourke Plaza, Harper Linwood picked me up in her beat-up sedan. She didn't say hello. She just jerked her head toward the passenger seat. "Get in," she said. "You need to see the anchor." "The anchor?" I asked, buckling my seatbelt. "The thing that is dragging them down," she said. "Or the thing that will hold you steady. Depends on how we play it." We drove away from the polished avenues of Briar Haven, heading south toward the industrial district. This was the part of the coast the tourists never saw. It was a landscape of rusted cranes, chain-link fences, and warehouses that smelled of diesel and dead fish. Harper turned down a cracked asphalt road and pulled up to a gate topped with razor wire. A faded sign read Grayfield Harbor Works. "This is it?" I asked. It looked like a junkyard. There were stacks of shipping containers, a few rusted hulls of fishing trawlers, and a corrugated metal office building that looked like it might blow over in a strong wind. Harper buzzed the gate. A moment later, it slid open. "This is what Ethan bought," she said as we rolled onto the gravel lot. "It looks like nothing, just a repair yard for mid-sized vessels. But look at the geography." She pointed through the windshield. To the north, the gleaming cranes of the Rourke Container Terminal dominated the skyline. To the south, the Deepwater Channel opened up to the Atlantic. Grayfield sat right in the middle, a stubborn wedge of land separating the Rourke Empire from the open water access they needed for their new supertanker contracts. "They need this land," Harper said. "They have been trying to buy it for 5 years, but the previous owner hated Ethan's father. When he died, he sold it to Ethan quietly. Ethan put it in a shell company. He partnered with a guy named Silas, who runs the day-to-day. We got out of the car. The wind here was fierce, biting at my face. A man in grease-stained coveralls walked out of the metal shed. He wiped his hands on a rag and looked at me. "You must be Alice," he said. "I am Silas." He had a firm handshake and eyes that looked like they had seen too much weather. "I am sorry about Ethan." He said, "He was a good partner. He never treated this place like a line on a spreadsheet." Harper leaned against the car. "Show her the contract." Silas nodded and led us into the office. It was a chaotic mess of invoices and coffee cups, but he went straight to a filing cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. Ethan knew the family would come for this place if anything happened to him. Silas said, "So we built a poison pill into the operating agreement." He opened the folder and pointed to a clause highlighted in yellow. "Right of first refusal and ethics compliance." I read, "Basically," Silas explained, "if the ownership of Ethan's share transfers to anyone else like his estate, the new owners have to abide by the existing contracts. And the existing contracts say that Grayfield cannot service any vessels owned by a parent company that has been cited for environmental or labor violations in the last 10 years. I looked up. "Rourke Maritime has violations," Harper laughed. A dry barking sound. "They have violations they pay to make disappear, but they are on the record if you know where to dig. If the estate takes over Ethan's share, they legally become the owners of Grayfield. But because Rourke Maritime has a record of labor abuse, they are contractually barred from using their own repair yard. It is a paradox." I said, "It is a trap," Silas corrected. "If they try to force their ships in here, they breach the contract. If they breach the contract, the penalty is forfeiture of the shares to the minority partner, me. And I donate the liquidation value to a community fund. I stared at the paper. Ethan had built a wall that his family couldn't climb without tearing their own reputation apart. But they do not know this clause is here, I asked. They have not seen the full operating agreement yet. Harper said, They just know they own the shares now. They are arrogant. They assume it is a standard lease, so we let them take it. I said, realizing the strategy. Exactly. Harper said, We let them seize the estate. We let them take control of Grayfield. And the moment they try to dock a Rourke ship here, or the moment they try to sell the land to themselves. Snap, Silas said, closing his hand into a fist. The high of that discovery did not last long. The next morning, the war shifted fronts. I walked into the nonprofit's office at 8 o'clock, ready to lose myself in work. The reception area was quiet, too quiet. My assistant, a sweet girl named Jenna, refused to meet my eyes. Alice, Mr. Henderson wants to see you, she said, staring intently at her computer screen. Mr. Henderson was the board chair. He was a good man, mostly, but he was a man who lived and died by the fundraising calendar. I walked into his office. He was standing by the window, looking out at the street. He turned when I entered, and his face was pained. Sit down. Alice, he said. I sat. Is this about the gala next month? I asked. I have the donor lists ready. It is not about the lists, he said. He sat on the edge of his desk, crossing his arms. Alice, you know how much we rely on the Briar Haven community, the families who support us. They talk. What are they saying? I asked, though I already felt the cold prickle of anticipation. Mr. Henderson sighed. I had a call this morning from a major donor. They expressed concern about your stability. My stability. There are rumors, Alice, nasty ones. People are saying you are challenging Ethan's will, that you are making wild accusations against the Rourke family, that you are, he hesitated emotionally unwell, that you are chasing money you are not entitled to and keeping Ethan's assets hostage from his blood relatives. I felt the blood drain from my face. It was Vanessa. It had to be. That is a lie, I said, my voice shaking. They are trying to bully me into signing a settlement that leaves me with nothing. I'm just asking for transparency. Mr. Henderson held up a hand. I believe you. Alice, I do, but the truth does not matter as much as the perception. Not in this town, if the Rourkes pull their support, and their friends follow. This organization loses 30% of its operating budget. We cannot survive that. He looked at me with genuine pity, which was almost worse than anger. I have to ask you to take a leave of absence, he said, just until this is settled. We cannot have the scandal attached to our name. I felt like I had been slapped. This job was my anchor. It was the one thing that was mine, separate from Ethan, separate from the Rourkes. You are firing me, I whispered. Paid leave, he said. Please, Alice, resolve it. Quietly, for everyone's sake. I walked out of the building with my personal items in a cardboard box. I sat in my car in the parking lot and gripped the steering wheel until my hands cramped. I did not cry. I was past crying. Vanessa had not just come for the money. She had come for my credibility. She wanted to make sure that if I ever spoke up, no one would listen to the unstable widow who lost her job. It was efficient. It was brutal. And it made me realize that I could not just defend myself. I had to destroy them. That night, the house felt larger than ever. The silence was heavy. I sat on the floor of the living room, surrounded by boxes I had started to pack, just to keep up appearances. My phone buzzed. It was a direct message on a social media platform I rarely used. The sender was user8921. No photo. I opened it. The message was brief. My condolences. You are looking in the wrong place. Look at the foundation, not the will. Attached was a screenshot. It was a page from an annual report, dated 2 years ago. It listed the board of directors for the Rourke Seafarers Foundation. There, third on the list, was Ethan Rourke. I frowned. Ethan had never mentioned being on the board. He hated the foundation. He called it a tax shelter with a conscience. He said they spent more on galas than they did on actual charity. I typed back, "Who is this?" The typing bubbles appeared, then vanished, then appeared again. Someone who is tired of carrying their water. Read the bylaws. Article 4. Then the account went offline. I grabbed my laptop. I searched for Rourke Seafarers Foundation bylaws. It took me an hour of digging through state charity registry databases, but I found them, a PDF scanned in low resolution. I scrolled down to Article 4, Governance and Morality Compliance. I read the text. Any member of the board, or any officer of the estate representing a board member, must adhere to the highest standards of ethical conduct. Conviction of a crime, or admission of civil liability involving fraud, coercion, or financial malfeasance, shall result in immediate removal and a mandatory independent audit of all related financial transactions handled by said individual. I read it again. Admission of civil liability. If Miles or Vanessa admitted to wrongdoing, even accidentally, even in a settlement, it triggered an automatic audit. And if the foundation was audited, I remembered Harper saying, they are moving things off the books. If the foundation was the washing machine for their dirty money, an audit wouldn't just be an inconvenience. It would be an apocalypse. I sat back, my heart racing. They were so focused on the will, on the estate, on the visible money. They didn't think I would look at the charity. I needed them to admit to something. I needed a record. The next day, Miles Ketter called me. "Alice," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "I have good news. The family wants to end this tension. They authorized me to offer you a clean exit package." I put the phone on speaker and hit record on my backup device. "What does that mean?" "Miles," I asked, keeping my voice tremulous. $150,000, he said, "immediate wire transfer, and we will let you keep the car. All you have to do is sign the waivers today and hand over the keys to the townhouse by Friday." I let the silence stretch for a long moment. "I am just so tired." "Miles," I said, "I lost my job yesterday. Did you know that—" A pause. "I heard about that. I am very sorry." "Alice, it is a small town. Rumors fly. This is why we want to settle." To stop the rumors, he was practically admitting it. But not enough. Not yet. "I will sign." I said, "Excellent," he said. "I can have the courier." I interrupted. "I have one condition." Miles's tone shifted slightly. "What condition?" "The Seafarers Foundation Gala is next week." I said, "I know the family is being honored." Ethan was on the board. I saw his name. "Yes," Miles said slowly. "I want to speak." I said, "Silence. I want 5 minutes." I continued, "To honor him, to say goodbye to the community. If I do that, if I can just leave with my head held high, I will sign everything. I will disappear." I could hear Miles thinking. He was weighing the risk. An emotional widow with a microphone, risky. But if he refused, I might drag out the settlement. And if I spoke and fell apart, it would only confirm Vanessa's narrative that I was unstable. It would seal the public's perception of me as the broken, weeping woman. It was perfect for them. "I can make that happen," Miles said. "As long as we can review your remarks beforehand." "Of course," I said. "I just want to talk about how much he loved the sea." "I will send the papers." "Alice, you are making the right decision." I hung up. My hands were not shaking anymore. I told Harper the plan an hour later. We were sitting in her car parked by the beach. "You are insane," she said. "It is the only way." I said, "I need to be in that room. I need them to feel safe, and I need to say things on the record that box them in. It is a trap." "Alice," Harper warned, "they will have security ready to yank you off that stage if you say one wrong word. They will have the microphone cut before you can blink. I am not going to accuse them." I said, "I am going to praise them." Harper looked at me, confused. "I am going to praise their commitment to transparency. I am going to praise their dedication to Ethan's wishes. I am going to thank them for the settlement." "Why?" "Because," I said, "Miles is drafting the settlement. He is the executor. If I thank him publicly for his handling of the estate, and then later we prove the estate was handled fraudulently, my public praise becomes evidence of his deceit, It proves I trusted him. It proves he misled a beneficiary in a public forum. Harper stared at me. A slow grin spread across her face. You are weaponizing your own gullibility. Exactly. But we need a lawyer. Harper said. A real one. Not me. And not anyone in Briarhaven. Someone who isn't afraid of Miles Ketter. I have a name. I said. I found her this morning. Tessa Ward's office was in the next city over, in a strip mall between a dry cleaner and a vape shop. The sign on the door just said, Ward Legal Estates and Disputes. I walked in. There was no receptionist. Just a woman sitting behind a desk buried under stacks of paper. She had messy curly hair, glasses perched on the end of her nose, and she was eating a bagel while typing furiously. She looked up. She didn't look expensive. She looked tired and sharp. Can I help you? She asked, wiping crumbs from her mouth. I am Alice Kelly, I said, and I need someone to help me set a trap for Miles Ketter. Tessa stopped chewing. She swallowed, then took off her glasses. Miles Ketter. The guy who wears suits that cost more than my car, I hate that guy. She gestured to the chair. Sit down. Talk fast. I bill in 6-minute increments. But for a story about screwing over Miles Ketter, I might give you a discount. I sat. I told her everything. The altered prenup, the threats, the photos, the foundation bylaws, the codicil I hadn't found yet but knew existed because of Ethan's note. When I finished, Tessa leaned back in her chair. She looked delighted. So, let me get this straight, she said. You are going to sign a settlement you know is unfair, based on a prenup you know is forged, just to get them to commit to the fraud in writing, while simultaneously triggering a morality clause in a charity they use to launder influence. Yes, I said. Tessa grinned. It was a wolf's grin. I'm in. She pulled the copy of the prenup I had brought, the one Miles had given me. She pulled a magnifying glass out of her drawer. Look at this, she said, pointing to the notary stamp on the last page. I looked. It was a standard stamp. What about it? The commission expiration date, Tessa said. It says, expires 2028. Yes, this document is dated 5 years ago, she said. Notary commissions in this state last 4 years. If this stamp expires in 2028, it was issued in 2024. I gasped. They used a current stamp, I whispered, on a document supposedly signed 5 years ago. Exactly, Tessa said. It is a sloppy forgery. They just assumed you wouldn't look closely. They assumed you were just a grieving housewife who didn't know math. She slammed the folder shut. We have them, Alice, but we can't tell them yet. We have to let them hang themselves. She pulled out a legal pad. Here's what we do. I am going to file a notice of appearance as your counsel, just to let them know you have a lawyer. But I am going to play it dumb. I am going to act like a strip mall lawyer who just wants to process the paperwork and get paid. I will annoy Miles, but I won't threaten him. I will make him think I am incompetent. Can you do that? I asked. Tessa laughed. Honey, men like Miles Ketter always assume women like me are incompetent. It is their superpower, and it is going to be their downfall. She handed me a pen. Sign the retainer. Let's go to war. I returned home that evening feeling a strange sense of calm. The fear was still there, buzzing in the background like a refrigerator hum. But it was manageable now. I wasn't alone. I had Harper. I had Tessa. I had Silas. I had a team. I walked into the kitchen to make tea. The red light on my landline phone was blinking. A voicemail. I pressed play. Mrs. Kelly. This is the florist. We are confirming the delivery of the lilies for the gala next week. Vanessa Rourke ordered them in your name. She said you wanted to pay for the centerpiece. I froze. Vanessa was ordering flowers in my name. She was already spending my money, already scripting my role at the party. I deleted the message. Let her order the flowers. I thought, let her set the stage. Let her build the pyre. She didn't realize that she was the one who was going to burn. Tessa Ward held the document up to the fluorescent light of her office, squinting through her smudged glasses. The air in the room smelled of old paper and the onion bagel she had finished 10 minutes ago. It was the least intimidating legal war room imaginable, which was exactly why I liked it. Look at the stamp, she said, pointing a pen at the bottom corner of the marital agreement Miles Ketter had filed. I leaned in. It looked like a standard notary seal, the kind I had seen a dozen times on mortgage papers. It was round, inked in dark blue, and dense with tiny text. "I see it," I said. "It has a name, a date. Look at the county," Tessa said, tapping the paper. I peered closer. "Plymouth County." So I asked, "Where did you sign this?" Tessa asked, "Where were you physically standing when you allegedly put pen to paper 5 years ago?" I closed my eyes, retrieving the memory. "We were in Boston," I said, "at Ethan's apartment in Back Bay. It was raining. We signed it on his kitchen island before we went out to dinner. Boston is in Suffolk County," Tessa said, dropping the page back onto her desk with a satisfied slap. "A notary in Massachusetts has statewide jurisdiction." "Sure. But the venue clause on the document right here at the top says, 'State of Massachusetts, County of Plymouth,' and the notary's stamp indicates their primary commission is in Plymouth." She spun her chair around to face me. "If you were in Boston, why does the document say Plymouth? And why would a high-end Boston lawyer like the one Ethan used back then drive 40 miles south to find a notary in Plymouth, then drive back?" "It is a mistake," I suggested. "Or," Tessa said, her eyes gleaming, "it is a copy-paste job. They took a signature page from a different document, maybe something related to a property deed down south, and attached it to this altered agreement. It is not a smoking gun yet. A judge might just call it a clerical error. But it is a thread, and if we pull it hard enough, the whole tapestry might unravel." I felt a cold knot in my stomach. They hadn't just bullied me. They had forged Ethan's intentions. They had taken his signature, or mine, and transposed them onto a lie. "So we sue them now?" I asked. "No," Tessa said firmly. "If we sue now on a technicality, they will just file a corrected version and claim it was an administrative oversight. They have the money to bury a mistake. We need them to commit to the lie. We need them to double down." She leaned forward. "You need to make them feel safe. Alice, you need to give them a victory so big they stop looking over their shoulders." I called Miles Ketter the next morning. I made sure my voice sounded thin, resigned. "Miles," I said, "I have been thinking. I do not have the energy to fight you on the numbers." I could practically hear him smiling through the phone. "I'm glad to hear that. Alice, it is the best path for everyone. I will accept the settlement," I said. "The $150,000, the exit. Excellent," he said. "I can have the papers ready but," I interrupted. "I have a request regarding the structure." A pause. "Go on." "I want $50,000 of that settlement to be donated directly to the Rourke Seafarers Foundation." I said, "In Ethan's name, I want it to be a public grant. The Ethan Rourke Memorial Fund for, let us say, maritime safety education." Miles was silent for a moment. I knew what he was thinking. He was thinking I was pathetic. He was thinking I was trying to buy my way back into the family's good graces, trying to look like a philanthropist with money I barely had. He saw a woman desperate for social validation. He did not see the trap. If I donated to the foundation as part of the settlement, and if the foundation was under the same control as the estate, it created a direct financial link between the inheritance and the charity, and if the foundation was corrupt, that money became part of the corruption. That is a very generous gesture. "Alice," Miles said, "the family will appreciate the optics. I want it written into the agreement." I said, "I want the donation to be a condition of my signing, and I want the language to state that this donation is in honor of the family's commitment to ethical leadership." Miles chuckled, a dry, dismissive sound. "I can draft that myself. Alice, consider it done." He was going to write the words himself. He was going to draft the legal instrument that tied the estate he managed to the foundation he advised, using language about ethics that he knew was a lie. "Thank you, Miles," I said. "I will sign at the gala." The Rourke Seafarers Foundation was housed in a historic brick building near the harbor, separate from the glass tower of Rourke Maritime. It was designed to look old money and benevolent. I had an appointment with Graham Sutter, the compliance officer. I had emailed him saying I wanted to discuss the logistics of my upcoming donation. Graham was a man in his 40s who looked like he was vibrating with anxiety. His office was small, cluttered, and hot. He kept adjusting his tie. "Mrs. Kelly," he said, shaking my hand with a palm that was damp. "It is good of you to come. We do not usually handle donations of this size directly. Usually, the development team handles it. I wanted to see where Ethan worked," I said, taking a seat. "He cared about this place." Graham flinched, just a tiny twitch of his eye. "Yes," he said. "Ethan was very involved. Toward the end, I looked around the office. There were filing cabinets labeled with years. I heard he was pushing for changes." I said softly. Graham looked at the door, then back at me. "Who told you that Ethan did?" I lied. Before he died, he said he was worried about the vendor contracts. He said he was working on a transparency addendum. The color drained from Graham's face. He stood up and walked to the door, closing it firmly. He turned back to me, his voice a whisper. "He told you about the addendum. He said the board fought him on it." I said, keeping my gaze steady. "He said he was recording the minutes himself because he did not trust the official secretary." Graham sank back into his chair. He looked like a man whose house of cards had just been blown over. "I told him not to push," Graham whispered. "I told him Vanessa would not like it. But Ethan, he was stubborn. He said the foundation was being used as a pass-through for the maritime company. They were inflating vendor invoices for events and consulting, paying Rourke subsidiaries for work that was never done, and writing it off as charitable expenses. And the addendum I asked, it was a policy he tried to force a vote on." Graham said, "It would have required third-party audits for any vendor over $10,000. The board voted it down 6-1. Ethan was the one." Graham looked at his hands. "He recorded that meeting?" Graham asked. I nodded. "I have the audio." Graham. "And the emails." This was a bluff. I had nothing yet. But Graham didn't know that. If that gets out. Graham trailed off. "I am not looking to destroy the foundation." "Graham," I said, "I just want to make sure Ethan's legacy is protected. When I make my donation next week, I need to know it is going to a real cause, not a shell company." Graham looked at me, his eyes pleading. "I am just the compliance officer. Alice, I sign what they tell me to sign. Miles Ketter handles the legal side. He structures the contracts. Miles handles both the estate and the foundation legal work." I asked. "Yes, he has been the general counsel for both for a decade." I suppressed a smile. "Conflict of interest. Huge. Glaring. Illegal conflict of interest. Thank you." "Graham," I said, "you have been very helpful." I stood to leave. "Mrs. Kelly," he called out. I turned. "Be careful," he said. "They knew Ethan was recording. That is why they shut him out of the building a week before he died. They said it was a security update, but they were scrubbing the servers." I nodded. "They can scrub the servers." I thought, but they can't scrub the past. 2 days later, Vanessa invited me for coffee. It was not a request. It was a summon disguised as a social grace. "Let us clear the air before the gala." She had texted. We met at the Gilded Bean, a bistro in the center of town where a latte cost $8 and the clientele wore sunglasses indoors. Vanessa was already seated, looking immaculate in a cream-colored cashmere sweater. She had already ordered for me a green tea. "I thought you might need the antioxidants," she said as I sat down. "You look tired." "Alice, I am managing," I said. Vanessa took a delicate sip of her cappuccino. "Miles tells me you are being very reasonable about the settlement," she said. "The donation is a nice touch. It shows maturity. I just want to move on." I said, "Good," Vanessa said. "That is all we ever wanted, for everyone to be in their proper place." She leaned in, her voice dropping to that confidential tone she used when she was about to be cruel. "You know, Alice, I was thinking about you the other day. I was looking at some old photos. Did you grow up in, where was it, Oakhaven?" "Yes," I said, "a small town west of here." "Right," she said. "I remember Ethan mentioning it. He said you had a little house with a porch and a swing set in the backyard. The one with the yellow chains." I froze. I had never told Ethan about the yellow chains on my childhood swing set. The swing set had been torn down when I was 12. There were no photos of it in my current albums. "How do you know about the yellow chains?" I asked. Vanessa waved a hand dismissively. "Oh, I must have seen a picture somewhere. Or maybe the investigator mentioned it. They are very thorough." She smiled. It was a predator's smile. It is amazing what you can find out about a person's past when you really look. The debts your father had. The reason your brother left town. We know it all. Alice, she was telling me that she had dissected my entire life. She had dug up the bones of my family's history just to find leverage. My father's debts were paid. I said, my voice cold, and my brother left town to join the Navy. Of course, Vanessa said. I am just saying. We all have histories. It is better to keep them private, better to take the money and start fresh. Don't you think? She checked her watch. I have to run. Board meeting. We are approving the gala agenda. I made sure to give you a 5-minute slot, right after the appetizers. Don't bore them. Darling. She stood up, dropped a $20 bill on the table, and walked out. I watched her go. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from a rage so hot it felt like it could melt the ceramic cup in my hand. She had threatened my family. She had violated my past. Game on. Vanessa. I drove straight home, needing the sanctuary of the townhouse. I needed to pack the last of the boxes. I needed to be alone. I put my key in the lock. It didn't turn. I jiggled it. Nothing. I pulled it out and looked at it. It was the right key. I tried again. It hit a hard stop. I stepped back and looked at the door. The hardware looked new, shinier. My heart hammered. I walked down to the lobby. The weekend security guard, a man named Ralph who I had baked cookies for at Christmas, wouldn't meet my eyes. Ralph, I said, why doesn't my key work? I don't know. Mrs. Kelly? He stammered. The building manager came by this morning. Said there was a request to rekey the penthouse unit. Emergency maintenance or something. Who requested it? I asked. Rourke Holdings, he said. They own the building, ma'am. I stood there, feeling the blood pound in my ears. They had locked me out. I had 3 days left on the agreement Miles had referenced. They had done this early, just to show they could, just to remind me that I was a guest in their world. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw a chair through the glass door of the lobby, but I remembered Ethan's note. If they come fast, don't fight fast. This was a provocation. They wanted me to cause a scene. They wanted me to get arrested for trespassing or disturbance of the peace. I took a deep breath. I pulled out my phone. I did not call a locksmith. I called the police non-emergency line. This is Alice Kelly, I said calmly. I am currently locked out of my legal residence. My landlord has changed the locks without notice or an eviction order. I would like an officer to come and take a report. 20 minutes later, a squad car pulled up. The officer was young, polite. I showed him my driver's license with the address. I showed him the utility bill on my phone. I live here. I said, my belongings are inside. I have a legal right to access this property until the 1st of the month. The officer nodded. He went to speak to Ralph. Ralph, looking terrified, showed him the work order from Rourke Holdings. This is an illegal lockout, ma'am, the officer said when he came back. Civil matter mostly, but I can document it. Do you want us to call a locksmith to get you back in know? I said, I will stay at a hotel tonight. I just want the report number. He wrote it down on a card and handed it to me. Case 259092. Illegal lockout landlord harassment. Thank you. Officer. I said, I walked away from my home, carrying nothing but my purse. I checked into a Motel 6 on the highway. I lay on the scratchy bedspread and looked at the police report number. Vanessa thought she was being clever. She thought she was homelessing me. In reality, she had just handed me a documented instance of harassment and breach of contract. She had just proven, on a police record, that the estate was acting in bad faith. I took a picture of the card and sent it to Tessa. Add this to the pile. I typed. The next day, I met Harper at her apartment. It was a studio filled with computer monitors and half-drunk coffee cups. I have it, she said as I walked in. The password. Harper nodded. She pointed to the screen. I tried every combination of dates, names, favorite sports teams, nothing. Then I remembered what you said about the note. The hint. From the vows. I said, I pulled up the video of your wedding. Harper said, I listened to Ethan's vows. He said a lot of nice things. But there was one phrase he repeated. I closed my eyes. Hearing Ethan's voice, I promised to be your harbor. I whispered, in every storm. Harper typed it in. In every storm. The screen flashed. A folder opened. 2 subfolders appeared. 1. Grayfield, don't let them touch it. 2. Codicil, read last. Harper clicked on the Grayfield folder first. It contained the deed, the operating agreement with the poison pill clause we had already seen, and a scanned letter from the Environmental Protection Agency addressed to Rourke Maritime, citing severe violations at their main terminal 3 years ago. That is the smoking gun for the contract. Harper said, proof they have violations. If they take Grayfield, they trigger the forfeiture immediately. Now the other one. I said, Harper clicked on the Codicil folder. It opened a PDF. It was a legal document, handwritten but formally structured. Codicil to the last will and testament of Ethan Rourke. I leaned in, reading the text. I, Ethan Rourke, being of sound mind, hereby establish this conditional bequest. In the event that my family, specifically the executors of my estate, challenge the residency or financial standing of my spouse, Alice Kelly, the following provisions shall automatically activate. I read on, my eyes widening. It wasn't just a will. It was a character test. Ethan had set up a spousal protection trust. It was funded by a life insurance policy I didn't know existed $2 million. But the trust only funded if the estate failed to provide the primary residence to the spouse. The estate attempted to enforce an NDA regarding family business practices. The estate filed any legal motion questioning the spouse's mental health. If any of these triggers were met, proven by court filings or police reports, the trust activated, bypassing the estate entirely, and there was more. If the executors act to dispossess my spouse, I hereby direct the immediate transfer of my voting shares in Rourke Maritime to the Rourke Seafarers Foundation, with the stipulation that said shares must be voted by an independent proxy appointed by the Attorney General. I sat back, stunned. If they attacked me, they didn't just lose the money, they lost control of the company. Ethan's shares were the swing vote. If those shares went to the foundation, and the foundation was forced to use an independent proxy, Vanessa lost her majority. He knew. I whispered. He knew exactly what they would do. He wrote a script. Harper said, and they are following it line by line. She pointed to the police report card I had put on the desk. You have the lockout. That triggers condition 1. They threatened my reputation. I said, that triggers condition 3. And the settlement they want me to sign has an NDA. Harper added, that triggers condition 2. We have them. I said, we can go to the judge tomorrow. No. Harper said. I looked at her. Why not? Because of Tessa's advice. Harper said, if you drop this now, they will fight the validity of the codicil. They will say Ethan was manipulated, or he wasn't of sound mind when he wrote it. They will drag it out for years. So what do? We let them finish the crime, Harper said. We let them sign the settlement. We let them take the house. We let them think they have won. We let Miles file the paperwork closing the estate. Once they file the closing documents, she continued, they are legally declaring that the estate is settled. They are locking in their actions. They can't claim it was a mistake later. And then I asked, and then? Harper smiled. You play the card. After they have toasted their victory, after they have broken the law on the record. I looked at the screen. Ethan's handwriting. In every storm. He had built me a shelter. But to use it, I had to walk through the hurricane first. I called Tessa. We found the codicil. I said, is it good? She asked. It is lethal. I said, good. Tessa said, do not show it to me yet. I want plausible deniability until the moment we walk into court. What is the plan for the gala? I asked. Go, Tessa said. Be the grieving widow, wear black, cry a little, sign their papers, Let Miles Ketter think he is the smartest man in the room." She paused. "And Alice, yes. Make sure you get a copy of that settlement agreement after you sign it. A physical copy, with Miles's signature on it." "I will," I said. I hung up. I sat in the dark of Harper's apartment, looking at the glowing screen. The gala was in 3 days. I was going to lose my home. I was going to lose my job. I was going to be humiliated in front of the entire town. And I was going to smile and thank them for it, because when the dust settled, I wasn't just going to get my inheritance back. I was going to take their empire apart, brick by golden brick. The ballroom of the Rourke Seafarers Foundation was a cavern of crystal and velvet, smelling of expensive lilies and old money. I stood near the entrance, wearing a black dress that was simple, severe, and entirely unadorned. I felt like a bruise on the perfect skin of the evening. Every eye in the room seemed to slide toward me, then quickly away. I was the widow who had caused a stir, the woman who was rumored to be unstable, the problem that was being managed. Miles Ketter found me first. He looked dashing in a tuxedo, a glass of scotch held loosely in his manicured hand. "Alice," he said warmly, "you look appropriate." "Thank you." "Miles," I said, "is everything ready?" "The papers are in the private lounge," he said. "We can handle the signing immediately after the speeches. Then the check is yours. A clean break." I nodded. "A clean break." I repeated. I walked into the room. I saw Vanessa holding court near the stage, surrounded by donors. She looked radiant in emerald green, laughing at something a senator was saying. When she saw me, her smile didn't waver, but her eyes went flat. The evening proceeded with the agonizing slowness of rich people congratulating themselves. I sat at table 19, near the kitchen doors, far away from the head table where Ethan should have been sitting. Finally, the lights dimmed. Vanessa took the stage. "We have faced a tragic loss this year," she said, her voice catching perfectly. "My brother Ethan, he was a man of the sea, a man of quiet strength, and though he is gone, his legacy remains with the family who loved him." She paused, looking out at the crowd. "We are honored that his wife, Alice, is here tonight to say a few words. It is brave of her to come." There was polite applause. I stood up. My legs felt heavy, but my mind was ice clear. I walked to the stage. I took the microphone. The lights were blinding. I looked out at the sea of faces, the people who had known Ethan for decades, yet knew nothing about him. Ethan did not like galas. I started. My voice was low, steady. He found them. Loud. A ripple of nervous laughter. Ethan liked work. I continued. He liked the grease of the engine room and the salt of the spray. But more than that, he liked truth. He used to tell me that a ship is only as good as its hull, and you can only trust a hull if you inspect it yourself. I looked directly at Miles Ketter, who was standing by the bar. He believed in work that can be audited. I said, he believed that if you look closely at the logs, at the numbers, at the details, you find the truth of a man. He didn't believe in secrets. He believed in accountability. That is the legacy I am here to honor. The truth, no matter what it costs to find it. I placed the microphone back on the stand. The silence was total. It wasn't an accusation, not explicitly, but the word audited hung in the air like smoke. I walked off the stage. Vanessa met me at the bottom of the stairs. She grabbed the microphone before the applause could fully die down. "Thank you, Alice," she said, her voice bright and sharp. Such intense words. She turned to the crowd, flashing a conspiratorial smile. "We all grieve in our own ways. Some of us throw ourselves into work. Some of us move on to new chapters very quickly." She paused, letting the implication land. "We are just glad Alice has found a way to secure her future so she can start over. I hear she has already found comfort in new friends. Perhaps that is why she is so eager to settle the estate tonight, to clear the decks for whatever comes next." A murmur went through the room. She had done it. She had planted the seed that I was having an affair, that I was rushing the settlement to fund a new life with a lover. It was a lie so bold it took my breath away. I stopped. I turned back to her. I did not take the microphone. I just spoke loud enough for the front tables to hear. I am not moving on. Vanessa, I said, I am just asking that the Foundation's annual report be released publicly this year, in Ethan's memory. Surely, you have nothing to hide. Vanessa's smile froze. Of course, she snapped. It is always available to our donors. Then I look forward to reading it. I said. I retreated to the hallway, my heart hammering against my ribs. I needed air. Mrs. Kelly. The whisper came from a recessed alcove near the coat check. It was Graham Sutter. He looked like he was about to vomit. Graham, I said, stepping into the shadow with him. You shouldn't have said that, he hissed. About the audit. About the report. Why, I asked. Because they are panicked. Graham said, Vanessa called an emergency meeting this morning. They are moving money. Moving it where I don't know, he said. But the donor funnels. They are irregular. I saw a transfer today from Rourke Maritime to a vendor called Gale Consulting. But Gale Consulting doesn't exist. The address is a P.O. box in the Caymans, and the Foundation just authorized a grant to them for logistical support. He grabbed my arm. His grip was wet and trembling. It is money laundering. Alice, they are pulling cash out of the company, washing it through the Foundation as expenses, and sending it offshore. If an audit happens, I said, finishing his thought, they all go to prison. Graham nodded. I need protection. Alice, if they find out I talked to you? I looked at him. This was the witness I needed. Keep your head down. Graham, I said, document everything. When the time comes, I will make sure you have a lawyer, but you have to be ready to speak on the record. He swallowed hard, then nodded. Okay, he whispered. Just hurry. 20 minutes later, I was in the private lounge. Miles Ketter spread the documents on the mahogany table. Vanessa stood by the window, refusing to look at me. This is the final settlement, Miles said. $150,000, a waiver of all future claims against the estate, and an agreement to vacate the townhouse within 48 hours. He pointed to the signature line. And here's the clause you requested, he added. The donation. $50,000 to the Foundation. I looked at the paper. It was exactly as I had asked. I, Alice Kelly, hereby donate $50,000 to the Rourke Seafarers Foundation in recognition of the ethical stewardship of the Rourke family. I picked up the pen. I looked at Vanessa's back. I hope this brings you peace. Vanessa, I said. She turned. Her face was a mask of cold triumph. Just sign it. Alice. I signed. Alice Kelly. Miles took the paper. He signed below me as the witness and executor. He handed me a check. $100,000, he said. The balance after the donation. I took the check. It felt light. It felt like blood money. Thank you. Miles, I said. I walked out of the room. I walked out of the gala. I walked out into the cold night air of Briar Haven. I had just surrendered everything. But in my purse, I had a photocopy of the document I had just signed, a document where Miles Ketter, acting as both executor and foundation counsel, had accepted a donation from a beneficiary he was actively defrauding. The next morning, the Rourke machine moved with terrifying speed. I was packing the last of my boxes when my phone pinged with a news alert. Rourke Maritime announces expansion of waterfront operations. I clicked the link. The article detailed how Rourke Maritime had successfully acquired the lease for the Grayfield Harbor Works facility, aiming to streamline their repair logistics. They had done it. They had seized Ethan's side venture. I called Harper. They took Grayfield. I said, I see it. Harper said. Her voice was buzzing with adrenaline. And guess what? They already moved a barge in. What, I have a drone up? Harper said. I am looking at the live feed. They have docked a fuel barge at the Grayfield slip. It has the Rourke logo painted on the side. I closed my eyes, letting the relief wash over me. They triggered the poison pill. I said, they are self-dealing. Harper confirmed. They are servicing their own vessel at a yard they now legally own, which is a direct violation of the minority partner agreement because Rourke Maritime has active EPA violations. Does Silas know Silas is laughing his head off? Harper said, He is logging the ship's arrival time right now. He is going to let them perform the repairs. He wants them to issue an invoice. Once there is an invoice, the breach is undeniable. Let them finish the repairs. I said, We need the paper trail. While the Rourkes were celebrating their acquisition, Tessa Ward was at the county courthouse. She was not filing a lawsuit. She was filing a motion that looked, on the surface, like standard bureaucratic housekeeping, motion for preservation of evidence. It was a generic request, asking the court to order all parties involved in the administration of the estate of Ethan Rourke to retain all digital and physical records for a period of 7 years. It was the kind of motion that usually gets rubber-stamped without a second thought. But Tessa knew exactly what she was doing. By filing it now, after the settlement was signed but before the estate was officially closed by the probate judge, she was creating a legal tripwire. If Miles or Vanessa deleted a single email, shredded a single memo, or wiped a server after this timestamp, it wasn't just suspicious. It was a felony spoliation of evidence. Tessa texted me a photo of the stamped filing. The trap is armed, she wrote. Now we wait. I moved into the rental that afternoon. It was a second-floor walk-up on the edge of town, miles away from the ocean view I had shared with Ethan. The carpet smelled of lemon cleaner and stale cigarettes. The windows looked out onto a parking lot. I sat on the edge of the mattress, surrounded by the few boxes I had been allowed to keep. This was the bottom. For weeks, I had been running on adrenaline, on the cold fuel of revenge. But now, in the silence of this ugly little room, the reality crashed down on me. I was a widow. My husband was dead. His family hated me. I had lost my home. I had lost my job. I pulled Ethan's wedding ring out of my pocket. I had worn it on a chain around my neck since he died. I curled up on the bed, clutching the ring so hard it cut into my palm. I am sorry. Ethan, I sobbed into the empty room. I am so sorry. I felt erased. It was as if the last 5 years had never happened. The Rourkes were rewriting history, painting me as a gold digger, a footnote in the grand saga of their dynasty. They were erasing Ethan, turning him into just another Rourke, stripping away the man who loved fixing watches and hated pretension. I lay there for hours, watching the sunlight fade across the cheap popcorn ceiling. I could stop. I thought, I have the check. I could just drive away, start over somewhere else. But then I thought about Vanessa's face at the gala. I thought about her threatening my childhood memories. I thought about the yellow chains on the swing set. They didn't just want to win. They wanted to own me. I sat up. I wiped my face. I wasn't going to run. I was going to make them wish I had. 2 days later, Harper came to the rental. She brought takeout and a stack of printouts. You need to see this, she said, pushing a container of pad thai toward me. What is it? I asked. I have been cross-referencing the billing hours Miles submitted to the probate court against the billing hours he submitted to the foundation for the same period. How did you get the foundation bills? Graham left a folder on a park bench this morning. Harper grinned. He is terrified, but he is helpful. She laid 2 spreadsheets side by side. Look at the dates, she said. I looked. October 12th, 2:00 p.m. to 4:00 p.m. Estate Administration Asset Review. October 12th, 2:30 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. Foundation General Counsel Vendor Contract Review. He is billing for the same time I asked. He is double billing, Harper said. He is charging the estate $300 an hour and charging the foundation $400 an hour for the exact same block of time. That is fraud, I said. It is worse than fraud, Harper said. It proves he isn't separating his duties. He is treating the estate and the foundation as one pocket. She pointed to another entry. And look at this. October 15th. Drafting settlement agreement for Alice Kelly. Billed to the foundation. I stared at the line. He billed the charity for the time he spent screwing me out of my inheritance. Exactly, Harper said. Which means the foundation paid for your settlement negotiation, which makes the foundation a party to the dispute. I sat back. If the foundation paid for the legal work to dispossess me, Then the foundation's assets are liable for the damages. And, Harper added, it triggers the clause in the codicil. The one about the lawyer representing both sides, I felt a cold thrill. Miles Ketter, the man who thought he was untouchable, had been too greedy. He hadn't just been unethical. He had been lazy. We have him. I whispered. My phone rang. It wasn't a number I recognized. It wasn't blocked. It just had an area code from 3 states away. I picked it up. Hello, Alice Kelly. The voice was male, calm, reasonable. It sounded like a man ordering a sandwich, not a hitman. Who is this? I asked. You are asking a lot of questions about annual reports, the voice said, and you are filing motions about preserving evidence. I didn't say anything. I hit the record button on my external drive. We understand you are grieving. The voice continued. Grief makes people obsessive, but you have your money. You have your exit. It would be a shame if you complicated your new life by digging into things that don't concern you. Is that a threat? I asked. It is advice. Alice. Stop before you get hurt. Accidents happen. Reputations are fragile. You are a young woman. Don't waste your youth fighting a war you have already lost. The line went dead. I sat there. The phone warm in my hand. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't a shout. It was a managerial instruction. Stop before you get hurt. They knew I was still digging. They knew about the motion. I wasn't scared. Well, I was. But the fear was different now. It wasn't the panic of a victim. It was the alertness of a soldier. They were afraid. You don't make a call like that unless you are afraid. I called Tessa. It is time. I said. Did something happen? Tessa asked. They called me. I said. They threatened me. Good, Tessa said. That means they are watching. That means they are nervous. I want to schedule the reading. I said. The reading of the will? Tessa asked. No. I said. The reading of the codicil. Are you sure? Tessa asked. Once we do this, there is no going back. They took the house. I said. They took Grayfield. They signed the fraudulent settlement. They threatened my safety. They have triggered every single condition Ethan set. I paused. I want to read it to them. I want to see their faces. Okay, Tessa said. I will file the notice. Mandatory hearing for the introduction of a supplemental testamentary instrument. I will set it for Tuesday. Tuesday, I said. I hung up. I looked around my shabby rental apartment. I looked at the boxes. Enjoy the weekend. Vanessa. I thought, it is the last one you will ever enjoy. The probate courtroom in the county seat was a study in drab functionality, a stark contrast to the gleaming glass tower of Rourke Maritime. The walls were painted a color that couldn't decide if it was beige or yellow, and the air smelled of floor wax and stale coffee. I sat alone at the petitioner's table on the left. I wore the same simple black dress I had worn to the gala. My hands folded on the scuffed oak surface. I had no entourage. I had no assistant. I was, to the casual observer, a woman who had been thoroughly beaten. On the other side of the aisle, the Rourke legal team looked like an invading army. Miles Ketter sat at the head of their table, flanked by 2 junior associates who were busy organizing binders. Behind the rail, in the gallery, sat Vanessa Rourke and her brother Julian. They were whispering, checking their watches, exuding the impatient energy of people who had a lunch reservation they did not want to miss. They looked at me with a mixture of pity and annoyance. To them, this hearing was a formality, a rubber stamp. I had signed the settlement. I had vacated the townhouse. I had deposited the check. Today was just the day the judge officially closed the file on Ethan Rourke's estate. Tessa Ward sat next to me. She didn't look like a high-powered litigator. She was wearing a gray suit that was slightly rumpled, and she was clicking a ballpoint pen nervously. Ready, she whispered. I looked at Miles, who was laughing at something one of his associates had said. Yes, I said. The bailiff called the room to order. Judge Harrison entered. He was an older man, tired-looking, with a reputation for moving the docket quickly. Estate of Ethan Rourke, the clerk announced. Motion to approve final accounting and distribution of assets. Miles stood up. He buttoned his jacket with a smooth, practiced motion. "Good morning, Your Honor. Miles Ketter for the estate. We are here to finalize the distribution. As the court is aware, we have reached a comprehensive settlement with the decedent's surviving spouse, Mrs. Kelly." He gestured toward me with a magnanimous sweep of his hand. "Mrs. Kelly has graciously accepted the terms, signed the waivers, and we have the executed agreement here for the record. The family wishes to thank her for her cooperation in this difficult time. We ask that the court approve the final distribution of the remaining assets to the Rourke Family Trust, as per the original will." Judge Harrison looked at the paperwork. "Mrs. Kelly," he said, looking at me, "you are represented by counsel." Tessa stood up. She didn't smooth her jacket. She just leaned forward, her hands bracing against the table. "Tessa Ward for Mrs. Alice Kelly, Your Honor. And yes, we acknowledge the settlement agreement regarding the marital estate." Miles nodded, already turning to gather his things. "However," Tessa continued, her voice cutting through the room like a serrated knife, "we object to the final distribution of the remaining assets on the grounds that the current will submitted to this court is incomplete." Miles froze. He turned back slowly, a polite frown on his face. "I am sorry, Your Honor," Miles said. "Incomplete. This will was drafted 5 years ago. It has been authenticated." "It has," Tessa agreed, "but it was amended." She pulled a thick envelope from her briefcase. "We are entering into evidence a codicil to the last will and testament of Ethan Rourke, dated 8 months ago." A murmur went through the courtroom. Vanessa leaned forward in the gallery, her face tightening. "Objection," Miles said, his voice sharpening. "We have no record of any codicil. If this document existed, it should have been produced during discovery. This is an ambush. It is not an ambush." "Mr. Ketter," Tessa said calmly, "it is a procedural necessity. The codicil was filed with the Plymouth County Registry of Probate's Secure Vault Service, with instructions to be unsealed only upon the filing of a final distribution motion by the executor." She handed the envelope to the bailiff, who walked it up to the bench. Ethan Rourke knew his family well. "Your Honor," Tessa said, "he anticipated that the existence of this document might cause friction, so he used a third-party service, Legal Vault Solutions in Boston. They filed it directly with the court clerk under a sealed docket number." Judge Harrison opened the envelope. He adjusted his glasses. He read in silence for a long minute. The room was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the fluorescent lights. I watched Miles. He was staring at the judge, his confident veneer showing its first hairline fracture. He was running through his mental files, trying to remember if he had missed something, if he had seen a charge for a Boston law firm on Ethan's credit cards. He hadn't. Ethan had paid cash. "The clerk confirms the filing is legitimate," Judge Harrison said. Looking up, "The date is verified. The notary is verified." He looked at Miles. "Mr. Ketter, were you not aware of this instrument?" "I was not, Your Honor," Miles said. He glared at me. Judge Harrison waved his hand. "Read the relevant portions into the record. Ms. Ward." Tessa picked up her copy. She didn't read it like a lawyer. She read it like a storyteller. Clause 4. The Spousal Protection Trust. Tessa read, "I, Ethan Rourke, recognize that the administration of my estate may be subject to pressures beyond my control. Therefore, I have established a conditional trust, funded by the proceeds of my independent life insurance policy held with Sentinel Mutual." Miles's head snapped up. "Life insurance," he whispered to his associate. "We checked for policies. There were none." "It was a private policy," Tessa said, not looking at him. "Paid for from a personal account you did not have access to. $2 million. She continued reading. "This trust shall remain dormant unless triggered by specific actions taken by my heirs or the executors of my estate. If the trust is triggered, the funds are to be released immediately to my spouse, Alice Kelly, for her sole use and protection. Furthermore, if triggered, the trust mandates that my voting shares in Rourke Maritime Holdings, currently 20%, be transferred not to the family trust, but to a blind trust administered by the Rourke Seafarers Foundation, under the direction of an independent proxy. I heard a gasp from the gallery. It was Vanessa. 20% of the voting shares. That was the swing block. If Vanessa lost control of those shares, she lost her absolute majority on the board. And what are the triggers? Judge Harrison asked. Tessa turned the page. Condition A, she read. If the estate or its representatives attempt to dispossess my spouse of our primary residence prior to a period of 12 months following my death. Condition B, she continued. If the estate or its representatives use financial coercion, threats to reputation, or intimidation to compel my spouse to sign a non-disclosure agreement regarding family business practices. Condition C, she finished. If the estate or its representatives challenge the mental stability or character of my spouse in a public forum or through private investigation, Tessa lowered the paper. If any of these conditions are met, the codicil states that the Rourke family has forfeited their right to Ethan Rourke's voting shares, and the Spousal Protection Trust is immediately activated. Miles laughed. It was a forced, breathless sound. Your Honor, this is ridiculous. Even if this document is valid, which we contest, none of these conditions have been met. We have treated Mrs. Kelly with the utmost generosity. We reached a mutual settlement. She left the townhouse voluntarily. There was no coercion. Tessa smiled. It was the smile of a hunter who had just heard the trap snap shut. Is that so? Mr. Ketter, she asked. She picked up a small stack of exhibits. Exhibit A, Tessa said. Police report. Case number 259092. Filed 10 days ago. Reporting an illegal lockout at the residence of Alice Kelly. The responding officer notes that the locks were changed by order of Rourke Holdings, while Mrs. Poe Kelly's possessions were still inside, and before any eviction order was sought. She handed the report to the bailiff. That is dispossession, Your Honor, Tessa said. By force, she picked up the next item. Exhibit B, a sworn affidavit from a private investigator. Mr. Carl Venner, we subpoenaed him yesterday. He confirms he was hired by Vanessa Rourke to surveil Alice Kelly, specifically to find leverage regarding her employment. She held up a USB drive. And Exhibit C, audio recordings of a mediation session between Alice Kelly and Miles Ketter. Miles's face went pale. In this recording, Tessa said, Mr. Ketter explicitly states that if Mrs. Kelly does not sign the settlement, her employer, a nonprofit dependent on Rourke donors, will face financial consequences. She looked at the judge. That covers Condition B, financial coercion. And finally, Tessa said, Exhibit D, a video recording of the Rourke Seafarers Foundation Gala, 3 days ago, in which Vanessa Rourke, in a room of 200 witnesses, implies that Mrs. Miles Kelly is mentally unstable and engaging in an illicit affair. Using this defamation to justify the expedited settlement, Tessa dropped the stack of papers on the table. The sound echoed in the silent courtroom. Ethan Rourke wrote a test, Your Honor, and his family failed it. Every single question. Judge Harrison looked at the evidence pile. He looked at Miles, who was now sweating visibly. The court will take a 15-minute recess, Judge Harrison said. Mr. Ketter, I suggest you review this codicil very carefully. The hallway outside the courtroom was lined with marble benches. I stood near the water fountain, watching the door. Miles came out first, walking fast, his phone pressed to his ear. Vanessa followed him, her heels clicking like gunshots on the floor. She saw me. She stopped. Her face was no longer the composed mask of the grieving sister. It was twisted with a rage so raw it looked painful. She walked over to me, ignoring Miles's attempt to grab her arm. You think you are clever, she hissed. Her voice was low, trembling. I didn't say anything. I just looked at her. You are nothing, she spat. You are a secretary's daughter from nowhere. You think a piece of paper is going to take my company away from me. I will bury you in litigation for 20 years. You will be old before you see a dime of that trust. She stepped closer, invading my space. You are no one without the Rourke name. Alice, no one. I looked at her perfectly applied eyeliner, her expensive hair, the fear vibrating under her skin. "I am not Alice Rourke," I said softly. "I am Alice Kelly, and I don't need your name, Vanessa. I just need your brother's vote." She recoiled as if I had slapped her. Miles walked up, hanging up his phone. He looked sick. "Vanessa, don't," he warned. She turned on him. "Fix this, Miles. You said she was handled. You said she was weak. She was," Miles said, looking at me with a strange expression. It wasn't anger anymore. It was fear. Real, deep-seated fear. I realized then that Miles knew. He knew the law better than Vanessa. He knew that the evidence Tessa had just presented wasn't just grounds for losing the shares. It was grounds for disbarment. The bailiff opened the door. "All rise." We filed back in. The energy in the room had shifted. The air felt charged, heavy with static. Judge Harrison sat down. He looked at Miles. "Mr. Ketter, do you have a response to the exhibits?" Miles stood up. He smoothed his tie, but his hands were shaking. "Your Honor, we argue that the settlement agreement signed by Mrs. Kelly 3 days ago supersedes this codicil. By signing the settlement, she waived all future claims. She accepted the terms. She agreed that the estate matters were resolved. Therefore, any triggers in the codicil are moot, because she voluntarily agreed to the outcome." I looked at Tessa. This was the pivot point. This was the moment the trap turned. Tessa stood up. "Actually, Your Honor, the settlement is the final piece of the puzzle." She walked to the podium. "Mr. Ketter argues that because Alice signed the settlement, she surrendered, but the codicil doesn't say, 'if Alice fights.' It says, 'if the estate acts.'" She picked up the settlement agreement, the one Miles had drafted, the one I had signed at the gala. By presenting this settlement to Mrs. Kelly, a settlement that included an NDA, a settlement that forced her to vacate her home, a settlement backed by the threats we have documented, the estate formally committed the acts prohibited by the codicil. Tessa leaned on the podium. If Alice had refused to sign, the estate could have argued that these were just negotiations. They could have claimed they never actually dispossessed her, never actually enforced the NDA. But by executing this agreement, Mr. Ketter codified the coercion. He made it a binding legal fact. The settlement isn't a waiver. Your Honor, it is a confession. Miles stared at her. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. He realized it. I saw the light go on behind his eyes. I hadn't signed the settlement to give up. I had signed it to lock them in. I had signed it to prove that they had completed the act of taking everything from me. Tessa wasn't done. "And there is one more thing. Your Honor." She turned to the gallery. "We call Mr. Graham Sutter to the stand." Miles whipped around. Vanessa gasped. Graham Sutter walked through the back doors. He looked terrified. He was sweating, clutching a briefcase to his chest, but he kept walking. He took the stand. He was sworn in. "Mr. Sutter," Tessa said, "you are the compliance officer for the Rourke Seafarers Foundation. I am," Graham said, his voice a squeak. "And are you familiar with the voting shares of Rourke Maritime Holdings?" "Yes. If the voting shares are transferred to the foundation, as the codicil mandates, who controls them?" Graham took a deep breath. He looked at Miles, then at me. Under the foundation's bylaws, specifically Article 4, if the shares are transferred due to a dispute involving family misconduct, they must be voted by an independent proxy appointed by the Attorney General. "And why are you here today, Mr. Sutter?" Graham opened his briefcase. He pulled out a stack of papers. "Because the codicil includes a whistleblower protection clause," he said. "It provides a legal defense fund for any foundation employee who reports financial irregularities related to the estate." He placed the papers on the judge's bench. "These are the transfer logs," Graham said, "showing funds moving from the estate to the foundation, and then to offshore accounts controlled by Miles Ketter and Vanessa Rourke. They were moving the assets to hide them from the codicil's reach, but they used the foundation to do it." The courtroom erupted. Vanessa was on her feet, screaming that he was a liar. The judge was banging his gavel, but I just watched Miles. He sank slowly into his chair. He looked small. The arrogance that had filled the room an hour ago had evaporated, leaving behind a man who knew he was looking at prison time. Tessa waited for the noise to die down. "Your Honor," she said, "we have one final piece of evidence regarding the asset known as Grayfield Harbor Works." She motioned to Harper, who was sitting in the front row. Harper handed a folder to the bailiff. "The heirs seized this property 2 days ago, claiming it as part of the estate. They immediately docked a Rourke maritime vessel there for repairs." So Miles said, trying to regain some footing, "It is estate property." "It is," Tessa said, "but the operating agreement for Grayfield contains a clean hands clause. If the owner of the property in this case, the estate engages in self-dealing with a company that has active EPA violations, the ownership of the land automatically reverts to the minority partner." She pointed to the document. "Rourke Maritime has active EPA violations. By docking their own ship there, the estate triggered the reversion. The estate no longer owns Grayfield. It belongs to Mr. Silas Vance, and Mr. Vance has indicated that he intends to sell the land to a competitor." Vanessa let out a sound that was half scream, half sob. Grayfield was the choke point. Without it, their expansion was dead. They had lost the voting shares. They had lost the land. They had lost the money. Judge Harrison looked at the chaotic scene. He looked at the mountain of evidence. He looked at the trembling lawyer and the screaming heir. Then he looked at me. "Mrs. Kelly," he said, "it appears your husband was a very thorough man." He banged the gavel. "The court accepts the codicil as valid. The settlement agreement is hereby vacated as a product of coercion. The Spousal Protection Trust is activated effective immediately. All voting shares are frozen pending the appointment of a special master." And he glared at Miles. "Mr. Ketter, you are to remain in the jurisdiction. I am referring this transcript to the district attorney's office for review regarding fraud and embezzlement." Miles put his head in his hands. I stood up. My legs were shaking. Just a little. I looked across the aisle. Vanessa was staring at me, her eyes wide, realizing the magnitude of the disaster. She had wanted to crush me. Instead, she had handed me the hammer. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just picked up my purse, turned to Tessa, and whispered, "Thank you." We walked out of the courtroom. The heavy wooden doors swung shut behind us, muffling the sound of Vanessa Rourke starting to scream at her lawyer. In the lobby of the courthouse, the press was already gathering. Someone had tipped them off, probably Harper. "Alice, Mrs. Kelly. Is it true you have taken control of the company?" I ignored them. I walked through the crowd, my head high. Harper met us at the bottom of the steps. She was grinning like a shark. "Did you see their faces?" she asked. "I saw them." I said, "But it is not over," Tessa said quietly. She was checking her phone. "What do you mean?" I asked. "We won the legal battle," Tessa said. "But people like the Rourkes don't stop just because a judge tells them to. They have lost their power, which makes them dangerous." I looked at the street. A black town car was idling at the curb. The window was tinted, but I felt eyes on me. "I know." I said. I touched the ring around my neck. "We stripped them of their armor," I said. Now we have to survive the war." I remembered the voicemail. "Stop before you get hurt." They had tried to scare me off when they thought they were winning. Now that they were losing, they wouldn't just threaten. They would strike. I turned to Harper. "Where is Graham?" "He is with the marshals," Harper said. "Protective custody until the grand jury." "Good," I said. I looked back at the courthouse. Miles Ketter was being led out a side door by 2 officers. He wasn't in cuffs yet, but he looked like a man walking to the gallows. He had read the sentence, the one sentence in the codicil that froze him. "Any attorney representing both the estate and the foundation during a dispute with my spouse is personally responsible for fees and damages if intimidation or falsified instruments are proven." He wasn't just losing his license. He was losing his fortune. He was personally liable for the millions he had helped them steal. I had given them exactly what they wanted. I had given them the settlement. I had given them the victory, and they had choked on it. "Let's go," I said to Tessa and Harper. Where Harper asked. To the foundation, I said. I have a board meeting to attend. The clerk cleared his throat, the sound echoing in the breathless courtroom. The air was thick, heavy with the scent of floor wax and the sharper, acrid smell of panic coming from the Rourke table. Miles Ketter was still standing, his hand gripping the back of his chair. He looked like a man trying to hold up a collapsing wall with his fingertips. He had just heard the judge validate the codicil. He had just heard the list of triggers his own actions had pulled. But the clerk had one final paragraph to read. It was the paragraph Ethan had labeled Liability and Accountability. The clerk adjusted his glasses and began to read. Furthermore, the clerk recited, his voice monotone and deadly, I, Ethan Rourke, being aware of the complex relationship between my family's estate and the Rourke Seafarers Foundation, hereby stipulate the following condition regarding legal representation. Miles went very still. In the event of a dispute between my estate and my surviving spouse, any attorney or legal firm found to be representing both the estate and the foundation simultaneously shall be deemed in breach of fiduciary duty. The clerk turned the page. If such dual representation occurs, and if said representation involves the use of intimidation, financial coercion, or the filing of instruments found to be materially false, the attorney in question shall be held personally liable for all legal fees incurred by my spouse, and shall be personally responsible for liquefying any damages awarded to the trust, should the estate's assets prove insufficient. The silence that followed was absolute. I watched Miles. He did not blink. He did not breathe. He was doing the math in his head. He wasn't just looking at a malpractice suit. He was looking at personal bankruptcy. Ethan had written a clause that pierced the corporate veil, bypassing the firm's insurance and aiming directly at Miles's own bank account. If the estate couldn't pay the millions owed to the trust, and with the Grayfield asset gone, maybe it couldn't, Miles would have to pay it himself. Judge Harrison leaned forward. He looked at the marital agreement that lay on his bench, the one with the questionable notary stamp. Mr. Ketter, the judge said, his voice deceptively soft. In light of this provision, and the evidence presented by Ms. Ward regarding the notary discrepancies on the marital agreement filed by your office, I am ordering an immediate forensic review of that document. Miles's confident posture finally broke. His shoulders slumped, the color drained from his face, leaving it the shade of old ash. He realized the trap wasn't just about the Rourke money, it was about him. He had tied himself to a sinking ship, and Ethan had just chained the anchor to his ankle. Your Honor. Miles stammered. I can explain. The notary. It was an administrative. Save it for the disciplinary board. Mr. Ketter, the judge snapped. Judge Harrison turned to the gallery. This hearing is adjourned pending the appointment of the special master. The assets are frozen. The voting shares are frozen. And I am placing the Rourke Seafarers Foundation under temporary receivership to prevent the destruction of records. He banged the gavel. The chaos that erupted was immediate. Vanessa Rourke was on her feet, her face a mask of fury, shouting at her brother Julian, who looked like he wanted to dissolve into the floor. I stood up slowly. I felt a strange, vibrating exhaustion. It wasn't triumph. It was just relief. Alice, I turned. Vanessa was standing at the bar, blocking my exit. Her eyes were wild, but her voice was forced into a low, frantic whisper. We need to talk, she said. I have nothing to say to you. Vanessa, I said. Please, she said. And for the first time, I heard desperation. Look, this has gone too far. Miles is an idiot. He mishandled everything. But we are family. Family, I asked. You locked me out of my home. You hired a man to stalk me. You stood on a stage and told 200 people I was a whore. I was protecting the company. Vanessa hissed. You have to understand. The legacy. She took a breath, trying to compose herself. We can make a new deal. Alice, a real one. 5 million. Cash. Today. We can wire it to any account you want. We just need to stop the receivership. We need to stop the audit. I looked at her. She was terrified. Not of losing the money, but of the audit. The receivership meant an outsider would be looking at the foundation's books. The books Graham Sutter had told me about, the offshore funnels, the money laundering. You can't stop it. Vanessa, I said quietly. She grabbed my arm. Her nails dug into my skin. You don't know what you are doing, she whispered violently. You are opening doors that are supposed to stay shut. There are people involved, powerful people, investors who do not like having their privacy violated. I looked down at her hand on my arm. Let go of me, I said. She didn't let go. She squeezed harder. Take the $5 million. Alice, go to Europe. Disappear. If the regulators get into those files, if they start issuing subpoenas, it won't just be me who goes down. It will burn everything, including you. I pulled my arm away. I realized then that the most dangerous people don't shout. They don't make scenes in courtrooms. They whisper in corners about investors and privacy. I am not afraid of the fire. Vanessa, I said. Why? She sneered. Because you are so righteous. No, I said. Because I already walked through it when you burned my life down. I stepped around her, and Vanessa, I added. She glared at me. Ethan knew. I said, that is why he ordered the audit in the codicil. He knew you were stealing. He knew you were using the charity to wash the company's dirty money. He didn't just want to protect me. He wanted to stop you. I walked away. I left her standing there, surrounded by lawyers who couldn't help her and money that couldn't save her. We pushed through the heavy double doors of the courthouse. The afternoon sun hit us like a physical blow. A swarm of reporters was waiting at the bottom of the steps. Microphones were thrust in my face. Cameras clicked in a frenzy. Mrs. Kelly, is it true? You have seized the company, Alice. Are you charging the family with fraud? What happens to the foundation? Harper tried to shield me, but I stopped. I looked at the cameras. I didn't smile. I didn't look like the grieving widow anymore, and I didn't look like the victorious heiress. I just looked tired. I waited for them to quiet down. I am not here to seize anything, I said, my voice steady. My husband, Ethan Rourke, believed in accountability. He believed that no amount of money puts you above the truth. I paused. For the last month, his family has tried to rewrite his life. They tried to erase his wishes. Today, the court reminded them that the truth is the only thing that lasts. Mrs. Kelly. A reporter shouted. The judge mentioned an audit. What are you looking for? I looked directly into the lens of the nearest camera. An honest accounting. I said, that is all. I just want to know where the money went. And I hope the Rourke family chooses peace. I hope they choose to cooperate. I turned and walked to Harper's car. I knew they wouldn't choose peace. People like Vanessa Rourke didn't know how to surrender. They only knew how to escalate. We drove back to my rental in silence. Tessa sat in the back, typing furiously on her phone. The order is entered, Tessa said. The special master is on his way to the foundation building now. Graham is meeting him there. They are going to lock down the servers. Good, I said. They won't be able to delete anything now, Tessa said. But Alice... I looked at her in the rearview mirror. Vanessa wasn't bluffing back there. Tessa said, about the other people, the investors. I know, I said. If the foundation was laundering money, it wasn't just laundering Rourke money. Tessa said, you don't set up offshore shell companies just for yourself. You do it for partners. If we expose the network, we are exposing everyone who used it. I know, I repeated. I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment complex. It looked the same as it had this morning, drab, gray, indifferent. I will call you later. I said, I need to sleep. Just for an hour. Be careful. Harper said, lock the door. I always do. I said, I walked up the stairs to the second floor. I reached into my purse for my keys. I stopped. The door to my apartment was slightly ajar. Just a crack, but I knew I had locked it. I had double-checked the deadbolt before I left for court. I stood there, my hand hovering over the wood. My heart began to hammer in my chest, a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I pushed the door open with my foot. Hello, I called out. Silence. I stepped inside. The apartment hadn't been ransacked. The boxes were still stacked against the wall. The TV was still on the stand. It wasn't a robbery. I walked into the small kitchenette. On the cheap laminate table, sitting alone in the center, was a small object. I walked closer. It was a ring, a platinum band with a simple groove down the center. It was Ethan's wedding ring. I gasped, my hand flying to my mouth. I hadn't worn it today. I had left it in the velvet box on the dresser in the bedroom. I had wanted to keep it safe. Someone had come in. They had walked past my TV, past my laptop. They had gone into my bedroom. They had opened the box. They had taken the ring, and they had placed it here, on the table. It was a message, a terrifyingly clear message. We can get to you. We can touch the things you love. Walls don't stop us. I picked up the ring. It was cold. My phone rang. I jumped, nearly dropping the band. I looked at the screen. Unknown number. I stared at it. The fear was a cold liquid in my veins. But beneath the fear, there was something else, a hard, jagged anger. They had touched his ring. They had invaded the one small space I had left. I answered the phone. I didn't say anything. I just listened. You just started a war you can't finish, a voice said. It wasn't Vanessa. It wasn't Miles. It was the same calm, managerial male voice from the voicemail, the voice of the machine. I closed my fingers around the ring. I felt the metal bite into my palm. I thought about the audit. I thought about the fear in Miles's eyes. I thought about Graham Sutter shaking in the witness stand. I exhaled, a long, steady breath. Then tell me, I said, my voice low and dangerous. What are you so afraid I'll find silence? Then the line clicked dead. I stood there in the fading light, holding my husband's ring, listening to the dial tone. The legal battle was over. The judge had banged the gavel. But Tessa was right. The real war had just begun.